for councillors to pose any questions they might have. So if we flip to the next slide, Hilary. So there's three components here in terms of council's role. One is a requiring authority, so that's essentially designations. Regulatory authority, and that's in terms of the processing the plan change / designation itself, and is also a landowner in the area, and of course it's in a joint venture situation and with the government in terms of the airport authority itself. So that's with the Ministry of Transport, and these roles are recognised within the statutory framework and are managed through established processes, and we'll get into that a little bit. So flick to the next one. So the two processes here are the designation, and there's two designations, and I'll get to those in a minute, and then a private plan change which deals with certain rules around acoustics, and I'll talk about those in a minute as well. So those have both been prepared and they've both been lodged with the council, and they're processes that run through the RMA. So we jump to the next one, and this will get into some of the details. So the private plan change, so that looks to update the noise contours or noise boundaries. So they're, the operative plan one is shown in blue, and the new ones are shown in red and yellow. So there are two contours, the red and yellow ones, and just excuse me, I'm a colourblind planner, which doesn't help, but the new ones are 65 dB LDN noise contour. So that is designed to avoid noise sensitive activities within that 65. So and that's really concentrated on the airfield itself. And then the second one, the 55, is to avoid or manage noise sensitivity activities within that area. Now that goes a bit wider and a bit more broader. And this is, Wayne talked about it before, reverse sensitivity. That's exactly what these are designed to address. Also part of that is actually the airport itself monitoring those noise contours and making sure that the movements and what's occurring in the airport actually meets the standards that are set in terms of those noise contours, and they're not actually going outside of that. Ian will be able to give, if you've got any questions around the details of those, Ian will be able to address those, but essentially there is a quid pro quo, if you like, in terms of these types of controls where the airport has to monitor its own noise and make sure that it's meeting those where those noise contours are situated. So that's the plan change side of it. Now if we jump to the designations as the next one. So they're called notice of requirements, but most people know them as designations. So there's two designations here. So the first one is to designate the airport, and that's for airport purposes. So the airport currently has an industrial general zoning. Airport purposes as quite a broad definition, and it just enables activities which are airport related or airfield related. The airport operates in terms of some of its activities, pretty much operates on existing use rights. Now, existing use rights can be a bit of a fraught process, particularly if someone takes you on existing use rights. So what the airport purposes designation would do would allow the airport to operate airport-related activities, such as its terminal, such as its flights, activities associated with it around engineering, fuel, all those sorts of activities, some of which may be covered by the current zoning, but some of them won't be covered by the current zoning. So it enables it to operate as an airport and undertake those activities itself. Attached to those conditions are some other noise monitoring requirement attached to the designation of noise and monitoring requirements. The second designation is what's called the obstacle limitation surface. So that's basically an angle off the end of the runways and around the runways where you don't want obstacles to occur within those areas. So poles, trees, houses, and all sorts of things like that. And so all airports generally have these. They come off the end of the runways, off the sides of the runways, and those obstacle limitation surfaces are designed to limit activities that might encroach within that obstacle, within that surface. So it runs at an angle off the end of the runways at each end, and off at angles to the sides as well. And that's the other designation. Some issues around that which we'll get onto in a minute. So if we just drop to the next one, Hilary, thanks. So the obstacle limitation surfaces, there's some exemptions that we've been looking at in terms of those. So one of them is around because of the terrain in Taupō. So the first one is around permitting existing building heights. So if there's a building height within the zone that these obstacle limitation surfaces run through, then that would prevail. So let's say it's 8 metres, then housing or whatever's in there would be able to build to that level. If they want to go beyond that, then they're going to have to go through a process. And the other piece of work has been undertaken, which Matt has done, in talking to both Transpower and the geothermal electricity generation about their situations as well. And they would need to go, and there would need to be a process, and Ian can explain this in more detail if you want to discuss it further, but it's called a Part 77 Civil Aviation Determination. And so those two entities are obviously been consulted on this, and they would look to enable their activities to continue within there as well. So those are the exemptions. Obviously, as I said before, this deals with, as you can see up top there, deals with buildings, structures, trees, and things like that to try and ensure that those obstacles don't intrude within those planes. And then just the next slide. So there's a consultation there that's been undertaken. So there's a list there who's been included so far. So we've got shareholders, we've got council as consent authority, CAA, Airport Association, General Aviation, so recreational aviation operators, tourism operators, tenants within the airport itself, Contact Energy and Transpower, and it has and discussions have been sought with local iwi as well. And then just finally, the next steps. So there's a need for some continued stakeholder consultation, documentation finalisation, lodge with the council, lodge all the detailed documentation by we've got May 26th there. And then the notice of requirement process and plan process would begin. So both of those would have to be publicly notified. Submissions come in. On the plan change, there's further submission process as well. And then you get to a hearing situation and ultimately a decision. So that's sort of a general run over of it. And look, I think we're happy to take questions on that.
Has anyone got any questions?
I think you may have answered my question, but I'll just check for clarity, because I did note that it affects private property owners' airspace as well. So will they be directly notified under this process?
Generally, you do notify people who are directly affected. So if you've got, say, the noise contours, for example, in most cases, you would, my experience, you would notify the people that are inside those noise contours. There is also obviously a public notification regardless of that, but generally you do notify people who are directly affected, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I was just noting the airspace above private properties as well. That does sort of affect them directly. So I assume that will be they'll be notified about that specifically, because I get the noise, yeah. But yeah, okay, no, that's great.
The airspace one is probably a little bit more difficult because it goes so far. Ian might know, I can't remember what the distance it goes, but that's quite a big area. Do you know, Ian, how far those go?
Okay, I'll give that some more thought, thanks.
Dean, with the boundaries you had marked on the 3-6 departure extending right out there, I assume that was for the terrain, but on the departure to the south, it doesn't seem to go very far at all. Is there a reason for that? Yeah, it's a map we're looking at there now.
Yeah, that's the map. Yep. I'm assuming, and Ian will correct me if I'm wrong, that'll be because of the predominant landing and takeoff approaches. Am I right there, Ian?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that's right. Sorry, I just had a quick conversation. If you're asking why... Hey, so Ian, just jump on one of those chairs there, push the mic button, pull the mic around in front of you.
Duncan. He's online. Hey, Duncan. He won't mind.
Turn the mic around.
Ian Munro from Airbus. We're independent aviation consultants. I'm based in Auckland, but our company is head office in Australia and Melbourne. We work people around the world, so we work through pretty much with all the airports in New Zealand in this sort of work and airport planning work. I believe the question was why the proposed OCB or 55 contour is longer in the north than in the south. Was that the question? And that comes because because noise contours are predicated on forecasts of the numbers of aircraft of different types and different noisiness. The runways that they predominantly use and where they are flying to, in other words, are they carrying a lot of fuel? So is their power setting high or low? In the case of the operation of the main runway, which is designated 1735, Air New Zealand, because they predominantly fly from Auckland, choose mainly in calm weather to land from the north and take off to the north. Sounds Air, flying to Wellington, you already know the answer of what I'm going to say, because they come from Wellington on reasonably calm days, will generally land from the south and take off to the south. So there's a predomination with the larger aircraft of northerly activity, and that's what makes the tongue of the what's called the OCB, out of control boundary, longer in the north.
Yeah, of course we're hoping we're going to get more traffic going to and from the south, aren't we? So I'm just wondering, why we're putting these boundaries in, we make them big enough. Right. So if I step one back, the process that we've done in consultation with Wayne is to look at what historical air traffic has been at Taupō Airport, covering commercial, covering skydiving, general aviation, helicopters, and project that forward. But included in that projection from roughly about 2030 is allowances and provisions for flights directly to Christchurch. And so, but the assumption that we've made is that if it did occur that there were direct Christchurch flights, that they would be operated by Air New Zealand, and that Air New Zealand was still likely to do the same operation. In other words, that we've got them as northerly ones. So, thanks for that.
Can I just say that when we did the analysis, Santé was still flying, so they were included within the analysis.
Yes, sorry, the Sounds Air was the analysis in 2023, but it still allows for Wellington. It's in there. There's projections. The contours there are projections out 30 years from 2023 to 2053. And so they've created a future allowance of noise exposure that it sets out to endeavour to protect the communities and guide operators for a long time into the future.
Thanks for that. We've got a question from Duncan Campbell, who's online. Can you put your question forward now, Duncan?
Oh yeah. No. I mean, I thought maybe you can educate me. I thought landing and takeoff was always dictated by the direction of the wind on the day. So that meant they could be taking off any direction, doesn't it?
It's a factor, but if in calm conditions, a pilot can elect to land or take off in the direction he wants to. So it's about 2/3, 1/3. It's 2/3 from the north, 1/3 from the south.
Oh no, okay. That's in frequency. No, I was just interested that the noise corridor things you got there would be different based on volume of the traffic. Was that how you worked it out? Is that what you're saying?
And that the aircraft that are in the north are the larger aircraft and therefore have a greater noise exposure than a smaller aircraft. Their engines, or two engines, the larger aircraft. And, yeah.
No, I'm just interested, like say an aircraft from the north is coming, but then the wind is such that he, needs to land from the south. I mean, that must happen. So I'm just interested that would affect the. Oh no, so it's probably takeoffs which matter more than anything, I suppose. Isn't it?
Yeah, well, they're both
the
in there, but in the way that's gone about is we've actually right at the beginning looked at the historical patterns of traffic and found that in the case of Air New Zealand in 2023, 2/3 of their operations, about 65%, were occurring in the north. And actually, without the actual details here, I haven't quite got that in front of me, and 1/3 from the south. And that was the pattern. That is the pattern of activity. If it changes, if there was a reason why that was to change in the future, then the contours would potentially need to be adjusted. But that's not how the activity was occurring and has been occurring. So yes, it depends on the wind direction, but it also on a calm day can be elected to operate wherever they want to fly.
Oh no, okay. And just one corollary to that question is, like Ian, I mean, I was kind of surprised when I started on the committee that there wasn't any sort of protection like this in the district plan. Is that common around the country at other airports or airfields?
So there's two matters to ask the question. One is about the land use controls that might go with noise boundaries, and it's my understanding, Dean, you're probably the better one to answer, but in the case of the Taupō district plan, you have noise contours, you have operative noise contours, and so the question is more, what are the land use and activity controls that we're applying compared with what might be brought under the private plan change. In the case of the obstacle limitation services, it is somewhat uncommon that you haven't got them. Most district plans in the country, if they have aerodromes or certainly airports, will have those there to control obstacles for the safety of flight.
Yeah, and perhaps if I could jump in there, my understanding is that while the contours are in the plan, there's no rules around them at the moment.
Yeah.
And yes, Ian's right. Even very small airfields around New Zealand, places like Omarama and Twizel and places like that actually have noise, or have either designations or they have contours, and they certainly have obstacle limitation surfaces. So Taupō's quite unusual, particularly given that it is actually Air New Zealand actually flying in and out there, in my experience.
Okay.
Could I perhaps just add to that? We've kind of taken care of it through other mechanisms, in that there's private covenants on all the private land for acoustic insulation on where the current operative blue boundary lies. So although it hasn't sat traditionally how other people have done it in other places, it has been managed.
I think probably answered the question. I was going to just ask for some, what were the implications on the private landowners or residents within that outer control boundary, the blue and then the yellow, but it sounds like there's nothing to see here.
Well, I've got a question along those same lines actually, because we're extending the operational a little bit further, are we? Is that not what we're doing? Okay. Well, even within current operations, how will this affect private ownership? Are we talking height restrictions on property? What are the unintended potential consequences on private landowners?
Perhaps if I can answer that first and someone else might want to jump in. So in terms of the height issue, so what we've indicated is that existing height limits that are allowed within the district plan will be exempt from the obstacle limitation surface, but if they wanted to go above that, then there's going to be a process. So I'm not sure what the height limit is, but let's say it's 8 metres, which is a general residential one, that would be exempt, but above that they would need to go through a process. In terms of the noise contours, so the noise side of things, it's generally around insulation requirements inside that 55. the 65, as I said, which is the one inside the airport, that in terms of noise sensitive activities, that'll be pretty stringent. That would be pretty stringent in terms of the control around that. So it is generally around noise insulation, which has sort of been happening anyway through the covenant process, which has been put in place that Hilary talked about before. So on the other side of that coin, as I mentioned earlier, this though does introduce an obligation on the airport itself to actually monitor its noise and make sure that it is actually meeting the standards that are set here through that. So the airport would need to continue to meet that where that 55 line is. Now, as Ian said, that has been predicated on out 30 years. So you would hope that at the moment, yes, they're meeting that, but it's also, but it has been predicated on an increase in flights and out a number of years. So that side of it doesn't exist at the moment.
Can I just add something in there as an example? With the obstacle limitation services, we have to do a survey every 5 years to meet our CA compliance. The last one was done December 25. The previous one in December 20 resulted in the airport having to pay around $40,000 to cut some trees down that were protruding through the obstacle limitation surface. Now, this protection would actually put that onus back on the owner of the land to cut them down, not the airport.
But that is the biggest issue that's going to affect people, is the obstacle clearance.
Yeah. I mean, the last survey we had done in December 25 has shown once again we've got to cut some trees down, but the amount of trees cutting down is less. It's around $15,000 worth this time.
And could I just clarify about that? And I think you're referring to a Type A survey. So there's a civil aviation requirement, as Wayne was just saying, to do those surveys, but those surveys tend to be, and I think I've got this right, generally in the direction of each end of the runway. In other words, where the aircraft are taking off and landing. The obstacle limitation service, and I'm not sure whether we haven't got have we got a picture of it? I'm not sure we have.
No, I think it's in the other one.
It's in the other one. So it's the obstacle limitation service is way more complicated insofar as it's actually. There's a sort of an example one. The run, obviously, the most critical parts of it are where the aircraft are taking off and landing, and that's sort of directly in line with the runway. On the flanks, on your eastern flank, like in many towns and cities in New Zealand, you have rising land, and that land protrudes into the lateral parts of the obstacle limitation surface. It's not uncommon, and pilots know about it, and they're informed about it, and they know the land is there. And so effectively what the proposal is in this is to declare the land is there, but also to declare that there is an existing building height allowance or provision of 8, or in some cases 10 metres, and that is there as well. In other words, we don't go through every house and say, oh, there's an obstacle here, laterally. What we're saying is on that terrain there's basically another surface 8 to 10 metres high, which allows for the permitted building height development that you already have in those zonings. So it makes it a lot easier for you. But now then, if somebody said, I want to actually build a 5-storey house, or I want to build a tower, they would have to make an application back through the airport and then from that back through Civil Aviation Authority to allow that to happen. But that is the proposed exemption, so that for landowners in those areas, effectively there is no change at all. It's what Wayne was saying is that in the area of the approach and departure paths where there aren't, I don't think there's any actual obstacles there, that has to be controlled. We can't allow trees to come up there because aircraft are flying over them.
We are pretty lucky at Taupo, aren't we, in that most of the land to the north, land to the north is over the pine forest.
It's the botanical gardens area. That's
where it becomes an issue. But
only in that area is the only protrusions, really. You have some just to the flanks of it, just to the northeast of the flank of it. There are with that there's a just touching the surfaces, and I think and then when you put 10 or I think 12 metres on top of that, there are small areas in and around the botanical gardens area which are just coming through. So,
but from people in houses, are generally not affected. But
not affected.
The departure to the north is predominantly, not totally, but predominantly over the forestry land.
Yeah.
And to the south,
It's fine.
it's
There's nothing there.
yeah, there's nothing there. So it's more
So I think, yes, you are broadly right in this, and you're asking what the unintended consequences of it are and how do you notify. I don't know what your GIS system might be here, but I'm certainly aware that in Auckland, where we've done this sort of work before, when providing for their second runway that will come, they've got an interrogatable GIS system so that anybody can go onto their property and click on it, and it will tell them the circumstances of what their development height can be. And I don't know whether that's something that you have here or at some stage. No.
I'm just going to come back because I wasn't quite finished, if that's all right. Because I know, just internally, this will affect our East Urban land blocks as well, where we're currently building affordable housing. And taking your point that vegetation might be included in that height restriction.
Yes,
Yeah.
obstacles. So,
Food for thought, people.
yep.
Well, it did come up last year with the triple glazing came up under that affordable housing concept, didn't it?
Yeah. So the permitted baseline under the district plan that we've currently got, whether that be for residential, also a bit of rural lifestyle comes in there and rural as well, is exempt from the obstacle service limitation. So if you want to build an 8-metre building, which in the residential environment, which you're currently permitted to do so, then you can carry on and do that under this proposed, as it's proposed at the moment. If you want to build a 20-metre tower in that residential environment within the obstacle service limitation, then you're obviously going to need to do a bit of talking. So that's where you trigger over that existing limit anyway, where we've already got limits for other reasons.
Yeah, I'm just picking up on the vegetation too, because people would probably be able to wrap their head around a height restriction on a building, but a lot of people do not apply that to vegetation. So
10 metres is quite some tree.
And the other thing, Ian, you could probably point out in that graph that Hilary's pointed up there, that the angle, and obviously given the angle, the height that things can grow to or be built to increases the further you get away.
That's right. So those slopes, if you're looking at the right-hand diagram, which is probably a bit easier to see, the wedge that is running to the right-hand side of that diagram is a composite of the approach slope and also the takeoff slope. They all interact with each other because there's also that what's called the conical surface, which is the sweeping one, and there's something called the inner horizontal, and all of these interact with each other. So it's a little bit complicated on the approach takeoff paths, but it's really only close in that you're actually getting to a point close into the runway where you're getting to a point that the effects of, and I think we've actually, the exemption actually deals with areas. In fact, doesn't have the exemption close into the runway, but further out, this idea of allowing a prevailing permissible height. But it will have to include vegetation as well. It's easy, but that gets picked up to a degree in your Type A survey, which you're doing periodically. So you're surveying and looking out that line and going, oh, ding, I've got something there's just coming up. Or more importantly, that tree there, and it's right down to tree by tree by tree. That tree is getting close. There's a little note sent to the landowner. You can't let that tree go through there. You need to deal with it now. So.
Steve.
Just briefly touching back on the other the map with the boundaries drawn, that most of that area is what the new residential area out there is built already. That didn't look like it extended that far.
Yeah, perhaps I can just provide a bit of clarity on this one. So at the moment we've got I know it's hard to see, and if you wanted to pop up later closer to the screen it might help explain it. But so currently we've got the blue one within the district plan. As we've mentioned, it hasn't actually got any rules within the district plan, but it has been covered off through private covenants about the acoustic measurements, the measures that need to go in for a consent for those areas. It's being extracted back a little bit. The yellow line is, and I'm talking about where it covers the residential environment. The yellow line is within the blue line, so it's actually pulling back a little bit for that broader boundary. Then you've got a more refined boundary that's tighter in around the airport, and so there you're saying it's really noisy in there, so you've got to actually, you have to do some really good acoustic stuff in there, and that's what you would expect. So the blue goes, and the yellow and the red become the new two boundaries. So it shrinks in a little bit with the yellow, but then expands out around the airport area. Shrinks in over the residential, but expands out over the airport.
Can I just ask I feel a bit silly asking this one, Hilary, and I've come in late, so my apologies. Are we future-proofing by reducing the area? Is that a sensible direction to be heading in? Sorry, I'll turn my one off and then you'll...
These are choices that you make. For example, look at that blue line of your existing operative, and at the top, it isn't a smooth tongue. It's already been cut. And it's quite common for councils to take pragmatic decisions about where you, because that's around defining land use controls. So if quite often we'll see council will say, actually it's going to be more pragmatic if we cut that off at this road and we don't apply it on the other side of the road, because at that stage you're right at the limit of that. The people on one side or the other of the road will potentially, if they stopped and thought about it, are hearing the same noise exposure. Noise exposure is very much also related to people's viewpoints. I love hearing aircraft noise. I suspect John does and Wayne does. It's my job. I get excited. Others don't. It upsets them. So it's around all those things are taken into account. You have choices in this. This is what the modelling, the reason we'll have shrunk in, and I can't tell you just how many aircraft were in that original modelling, but it's just the modelling that's now used. It's an American model called AEDT, but 10 or 15 years ago it would have been another American model called INM. And it's just been now regarded that today's models around the world are doing it better than they did in the past. Aircraft are somewhat quieter, not so much perhaps here because you've still got turboprop aircraft, but certainly at airports that have jet aircraft, the engine noise and the fuselage wing noise is less than it was 20 years ago. So it's quite common around the world that noise contours are shrinking back a little bit, and particularly as councils, municipalities are saying, actually we need a bit more development land, and they will make pragmatic decisions about what you do there.
But then the question was, are we being a bit too conservative?
I can't answer that for you because we've just done technical work.
Yeah, I know, but it's everyone that's listening. It's because while you're saying most of the movements are to the north, both takeoff and landing, that the skydiver movements all generally to the south, albeit they're single engine, but there's a lot more of them. So I just worry about it, putting them in there, and then we find out in a year's time they're too conservative.
Well, there's a conservatism of 30 years there anyway, which and look, this also comes back to the land use controls you put there, because it's primarily focused at the prohibition or restriction of noise-sensitive activities, schools, rest homes, hospitals. I need you back here in this one, Dean. The question of acoustic treatment to houses is a decision for you. What you take on in that respect.
Yeah, I think.
Is that okay? Following on from that, wanting to protect our district as far as investment, we're starting to get some international purchases with private jets where, if we shrink this up, are they still going, I don't know how they work as far as noise or anything like that, are they going to be able to come in or not?
Yes, you can still fly them in, and I'll come back and talk about monitoring and compliance. They were not turning up in the database when we did this in 2023, and there isn't a specific allowance. I think that's right. There's no specific allowance for private jets in here. You've still got, effectively, compared with 2023, about let's say call it a bucket or an allowance of double the traffic level. So if you had 10 or 20 or 100 jet movements in the year or something like that, the probability that when you did the monitoring or did more modelling to monitor it is that it will comfortably fit in. But but certainly by the time you go to Queenstown, that's a specific category that's looked at because the level of them is so much.
That's what's coming our way, like our neighbour.
Well, I think that really interesting point.
In.
It didn't come into our original modelling, and I can't comment on why it's not there, but it would because it wasn't there historically.
Because that's something I'd really like
to
see. You know, I'm aware of some other property that's going to become available that's already being viewed by people with private jets that are wanting.
The way
and
that
there's one already there.
The way that monitoring, the last line that says requiring monitoring and compliance, and it's normal for an airport to track and at times remodel where they're heading. In the case of Dean, I think you probably got. I can't remember whether we had a conversation, but it doesn't need to be annually here. At some airports, you do it every 2 years. I suspect in Taupo appropriate ways. 5 years, Dean. For a noise.
I'm not sure what we've got in there, but my experience is generally somewhere between 3 and 5.
3 and 5 years, and so 3 to 5 years. It would be normal to commission something that said, let me have a look at the traffic and just see whether the patterns of traffic are changing, whether they are growing faster or slower, and then just do a remodel so that you actually say, this is where the noise exposure is today compared with the longer term protections. And that's something, where you can pick it up.
I'm just concerned with the direction of local government that if we cease to exist, are we actually going to cut our district off from being able to accept these sorts of people to our community, which will add a great deal to our community, whether we should be.
I mean, can I say that when the analysis was done in 2023, we were on around 17,000 movements a year. A movement is a takeoff and a landing, so that's 2 movements. The jet traffic was probably around 200 movements a year after that 17,000. They have increased. We're probably around 300 movements a year now, so 150 jets coming in per year. Now, I don't know whether that's... I mean, these jets are in size from small Cessna-type jets right up to Gulfstream. But they tend to be quieter, believe it or not, than the turboprops that are coming in.
Okay.
So I don't think they would have a huge impact on the analysis at this stage.
Yeah.
And as I say, I'm not a technical, so I'm just trying to just
but that's what this is about.
Look, however, Wayne, we do not want to exclude them, and that's what Kylie's trying to...
No, the whole intention is we actually encourage them. I mean, we've now got Escape Aviation, who are based, or a fixed-based operator at the airport, who are bringing even more private jets in now.
I know, so we do have, I've just gone back and looked on this. There is a provision for day and night movements for general aviation jet. And it is basically around about 0.5 in a day, 0.5 in a day. So basically one every second day is in the model. Now, Wayne, maybe that's something we should take on board as feedback and have a look and see whether, one, whether we think that's appropriate from what you're saying, and two, what the effect would be.
At this stage, yes, but forecasting out 30 years, probably not.
Yeah, well, I guess we need to inform you so that you can respond back. I think it's a really good question. So there is a provision in there. Is it appropriate? Is the question.
No, you have a question?
Ian, the other thing you might want to just explain, Ian, is the LDN, just the day-night movement, because that might not have, we haven't really explained that. But
so again, we look at the pattern, the existing pattern of traffic, both in day and night. Night being between 10 o'clock and 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock in the morning, and an aircraft movement, a takeoff or a landing that occurs at night is penalised 10 times. It's the equivalent of 10 daylight flights. So just to let you know in there, so that if that is occurring, there's an allowance. There's fewer movements in the night anyway, but the ones that we projected to have in the future are penalised in their noise as if they were 10 movements, each one of them.
Now, who are you?
I just want to understand if there's any impact on the forestry around for the airport? How does this impact, and what kind of conversations have we had with them to ensure it doesn't?
To the north, yes, but that we're in contact with Landcorps all the time because they look after those trees. To the east of the airport doesn't affect us at this stage. Anything that affects us the east of the airport, I think, Ian, is the electricity pylons, I do believe.
So we don't anticipate any of this to affect.
We're actually, during the consultation process, we're actually talking to iwi, but they've not responded.
Really, what would be, if I'm reading the maps properly, it would only be the Land Court Forestry, Nahuia, if you can picture that.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah, so,
that up with the Google Maps.
yeah.
Open to it. Just doesn't comprehend.
Yeah, so like Taupō Forest, to my
Nahuia, I
understanding
can
of the
tell you
boundary is not.
myself from flying out of there that it is only the Land Court Forest to the north that it might impact on. Any to the forest to the south, it won't. Unless the trees are going to start growing 3 or 4 times the height of pine trees. So.
John.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, as long as it's been covered, that's all.
Duncan, you have a question? Sorry.
Oh yeah, look, perhaps you've said it before. I just wanted to clarify. Two points. One was, reverse sensitivity. If we're the airport is there, of course, but if we're introducing a new, this is a plan change and might impact some people who are already there. Say they have big trees. And we're now going to be telling them that, hey, that tree has to be brought down or lowered at your cost. Whereas before now, as far as I can make out, council is the one wearing the cost. So how does that work? I mean, is that just the way it's going to work? We're going to impose this new change to the district plan, and in a few months' time, we'll be approaching these people and expecting them to come to the party. So that's a question, really.
Can I just add a little reminder here that we're this hasn't actually been lodged with council yet. So the airport, as the applicant, will lodge this with council, and then it goes through a full first schedule process. So it gets notified. Anyone has an opportunity to make a submission, and if they wish so, a further submission, and appear at a hearing. So there is a long road ahead of this where people have the opportunity to input their concerns or questions around that. That may be helpful to remember.
As far as I can make out, there's not going to be many people in that category anyway. So there's been measures taken to avoid that, so that's good. We'll just have to see what that comes out in the wash. But the second thing is, there's a question for the experts, if you like. I mean, it's a speculative question. Electric planes should today become more of, or even less noisy aircraft, because aircraft are generally getting less noisy as time goes by with better technology. So would that, I'm assuming these boundaries are based on present technology and aircraft. So in the future, when aircraft get quieter, does that mean we would revisit these and reduce the restrictions?
Ian here.
Sorry.
Go,
You go, Ian.
Right. The answer, I think, is, again, it's in your hands, but yes, and airports do that. The example I gave before was larger airports which have predominance of jet aircraft, and over the last 30 years they've got quieter through different types of aircraft engines and different treatments of the wings and things. And yes, electric aircraft will come in, and Taupō will be, I think, quite significantly affected or benefited from it because of your relatively short distances you're travelling. New Zealand is testing them now. Is that process going? So it's something when and as you see that emerging and settling in here, it's appropriate, I think, to remodel. And maybe that's something, if you do a compliance, my feeling is it's a 5-year process for you, but look at that and say, hey, there's evidence coming here, the patterns are changing, we should remodel.
Thank you, Ian.
And
Kylie. Sorry, Rachel.
Just through the chair, just picking up on Duncan's query about the height restriction. If I've understood correctly, the height restriction will be as it stands now. It's not a new height. It's not an all of a sudden people have to comply. They would have already had to, correct? For buildings, yeah.
But to operate the airport, we've got to comply with it now, or we'd be restricted.
I was just picking up on Duncan's point. He was worried that private property owners were all of a sudden going to have to cut down all their trees, but no.
That's correct, Wayne, isn't it? We're in compliance with the obstacle clearance now, so
we are in compliance with the one that was done in December. If we cut these trees down, which we're negotiating with Land Court at the moment, the next one in 2030, if there's trees above or through the obstacle limitation service then, and the district plan change goes through, it'll be up to the landowner to cut them down, not us.
Okay, anyone got any further? Oh, Steve, sorry. Or?
I'll just back a couple of steps, the private jet usage. I mean, it's already at 150 3 years down the road, and we're talking about a 30-year modelling. We're miles off, so it'd be good if we can reconsider that, I think. Yep.
I did think that the developer, Karasit Naruto, paid for some of those trees to come down. No, they didn't. It was Land Court.
The ones that we cut down 2 years ago, we paid for taking them down, treating them, and also the carbon credits we had to pay for.
Oh, okay. And obviously the Botanical Gardens is...
with the Botanical Gardens, we revisited that. We actually did an aeronautical study on it, and they were just outside the fan, so they survived.
Yeah. Might not be when the next one comes up.
That's right.
And there are some massive trees up there, that's for sure.
And Wayne, just to clarify, where you have done that survey and gone down the process of trimming trees, that's in the approach. It's the wider of the two fans, the approach part.
That's on the 35 approach.
The 35 approach, yeah. Which is the approach from the north to the runway. So it's only the one trapezoid that we're talking about, not the surrounding flanks.
Okay, we are starting to run a bit short on it. We're well over time, in fact, but if any other urgent questions, if not, it's just a workshop, won't make any decisions today, but if there's anything urgent, we can probably take one more, but if not, thank you guys. Appreciate the time and the presentation. It's been interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.